Welcome back. Stamp collecting is one of the most popular hobbies in the world. A stamp collector is called a philatelist, and philatelists all have a story to tell.
Albert Puglisi's day job is to make sure that the mail processing machines at the Brooklyn Processing and Distribution Center all work properly. And although he takes his job very seriously, his passion is learning about world history through the art of stamp collecting.
I started collecting stamps quite a while ago. I was somewhere around 10 or 12 years old. Right at the corner of our block where we lived in Brooklyn there on Fulton Street, there was a small stamp store. It was called Bob and Paul Stamp and Coin. And he would sell used stamps, mint stamps, meaning unused, and we naturally bought whatever we could afford. Slowly but surely, my interest began to expand, and I started getting into what we call covers. And what a cover is any type of envelope that's been postally used. It could be a foreign cover, it could be a U.S. cover. Real treasures is when you would find a used registered cover. This registered mail was not really that common. And if you found a registered cover, that was like a real prize that you'd put in your collection. Past several years, I've been concentrating on these historical covers. Preferably, I enjoy the covers that were postmarked and postally used before the year 1900. The reason for that is the stamps are exquisite works of art. Before 1900, stamps were very, very ornate. And in addition to the stamps being ornate, the postal cancellations were very ornate. Other interesting aspects of the collection are covers that themselves have artwork on them. Sometimes it's not just the stamp and not just the cancellation, it's the cover itself. And there is one article in the collection specifically comes to mind from a bicycle manufacturer. And all along the border of the envelope are bicycle parts. And these are from the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s. Showing bicycle parts from these old bikes that they used to call them velocipedes in those days. I have an airmail collection showing covers with first jet flights. I remember as a child, we'd be playing outside, and every time a jet would go by, everyone would point to it and say, "Oh, look, a jet's going by." You know, we're so used to propeller-driven planes, and post offices recognized this, and they would have special rubber stamps made up, and they would have the first jet flight out of a specific, area of the country. One of the most unique stamps in my collection, or rather, it's actually technically a non-stamp, is one that was proposed to be issued in commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the dropping of the atomic bomb on Japan. And there was quite a bit of complaining by the Japanese government about this stamp. They did not want it issued. And the U.S. government, in coordination with the Postal Service, decided not to issue it. Because of this, a group of collectors got together and actually had the stamp made without any monetary designation on it. So it's basically more like what you would call a poster stamp. They had these stamps affixed to envelopes, and they made a pseudo cancellation called the first day of non-issue. And these were sold throughout the country to collectors. The rarest stamp I have probably has to be the Zeppelin stamp. I've always been very fond of their history, the Hindenburg, especially the Graf Zeppelin, which is one of the very few that did not end by crashing. And in the collection, I have what is known as the Baby Zepp. That is the 50-cent Zeppelin stamp issued, I think it was 1932 or 1933. And as soon as the Hindenburg crashed, these stamps were instantly pulled from the market. And all stockpiles of them were burned, and they were destroyed because the Zeppelin was finished. Right after the Hindenburg went down, that was it. There would be no more Zeppelins. It's interesting to look at these and realize that postal workers of yesteryear had to do all of this manually. Everything had to be read. Even the canceling stamps were handmade. They were made of cork. They were made of wood. We're talking days when there was no electric light, and an engraver had to sit down and with very tiny tools and a lot of patience had to actually engrave the plates by hand. And these are all the things that make it very, very interesting. They're very historical things. They really need to be preserved. The works of art are incredible. You look at these things and you realize this is the blood and sweat of an engraver that took possibly weeks or maybe even months to perfect the image and to compose the image. And the detail is just amazing. I am very proud to be a postal worker. The Postal Service has got a long and prestigious history, and I hope that this continues. And I understand these days things are a little different. You don't have as much engraving as we used to have. But nonetheless, you still see pretty significant designs coming out today. They're miniature works of art, and in some degree, the photo process gives us things we couldn't have, because you can take a painting that someone painted or a statue that someone carved, and it can be photographed and transformed into a stamp. Stamp collecting is a very good educational tool. I really would like to see younger people get into the hobby. You learn a lot, you get to learn geography, and you begin to learn about other countries. It's a fascinating hobby, and the more youngsters we get into this, I think the better off it'll be for everyone.
Now for our final story. We had to look hard